So in one of my previous videos, I talked about a huge money mistake that I made and that I was saving money, doing a good job at it, but I was saving it in the wrong type of accounts. Instead of saving money in a high yield savings account, I was saving it in just your traditional account, earning like 0.1, 0.2% interest when I could have been doing a lot better. So huge money mistake that I made. In this video, I want to talk about my second big money mistake. Now, here's the deal. I consider myself to be a reasonably smart person. I mean, I'm not a genius, but I'm a pretty smart dude. I will give myself that. But sometimes you're in the room with another person or other people, and you might think that you're the smartest guy in there. You might think you have all the answers, and then that's when you make a huge mistake by trying to be the smartest person in the room, and that mistake might turn out to be a mistake that costs you some money. And that's what happened to me. That's what we're going to talk about. So back in 2008, during the housing market crash, I decided to buy my very first house. This was going to be my primary residence, and I saw an opportunity. The market was like down, and at any point in my life that I was going to buy a house, then this was the time that I was going to buy it. Before then, all of my adult life, I had lived in an apartment. So found a house for $136,000. Very nice house, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, nice neighborhood, nice school district. The house was about 1,600 square feet or so, which was more than enough for me because I was single with no kids. So perfect match for me. I buy this house and I live in this house for 1 year. And then fast forward, I end up getting married and I move out of my house and move into my wife's house. Now, I did not want to sell my house because the market was still down and I didn't want to lose money and I didn't want to sell it and just break even either. So I decided that I was going to rent it out. So my agent who helped me buy the house was an investor and a property manager as well. So she decided to help me out in renting the property out. And that's exactly what she did, got it rented out. And I remember at the time the property was rented for like maybe $1,200 a month, which was good enough for me because I had at least had enough sense to write down the expenses that I was going to need to take care of with the property that factored in at least some amount of maintenance and repairs, and as well as the property manager, as well as the mortgage. So I had a good idea of the numbers that I needed to at least make it work. Now, I wasn't a real estate pro or anything at this time, so I didn't have all of the numbers. And I think at that time, my mortgage may have been like maybe $1,000 or so, maybe $1,100. So me getting 12 to 1,300 still was a good deal because I saw that the property was going to appreciate at that time. Because we're talking about at that time $136,000 for the property. So we're living in my wife's house, and mind you, she had 2 kids from a previous marriage, and we had 1 kid together. So it's 5 of us living in the house, and it's a decent sized house. It's like 2,400 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2 living areas. So we're reasonably comfortable. But as time goes on, my wife comes to me and says, "Hey, I saw this house," and she said, "You're not gonna believe it." She's like, "It's only $240,000," because at this time the housing market was still in the dumpster, right? And she said, "This house will never be this price ever again. We gotta get this house. We gotta get it." And I was reluctant to it because you have to keep in mind, I had only bought one house in my lifetime, and that house was $136,000, and that was the most money I'd ever spent in my life. So the idea of spending $240,000 at that particular time in my life was mind-boggling to me. So you have to keep in mind, I'm only 2 years removed from living in an apartment paying $1,000 a month, and my mortgage payment at my primary house wasn't that much more. So I can't fathom jumping up and paying now 1,300, 1,500, or 2,000 or $2,500 a month to live in a house. That just wasn't something that computed to me. So I was reluctant to go see this house, but she kept nagging me about it. So I said, "Okay, let's go look at the house." I look at the house, and the house was nice. It was a very beautiful house. Huge. House had to be about 4,000 square feet, probably had 5 bedrooms, 4 baths, had multiple living areas, and it had a very nice backyard that backed up to like a little creek. And the house was just super nice from the outside as well, in a very nice neighborhood too. So all the houses around it looked nice, and everybody kept their yard up, and it was just very, very nice. I'm telling you, I would have to agree with that. And it was $240,000. Now, I don't know what the houses sold for before that because, again, I wasn't into real estate like that. So my wife, she had bought and sold, 2 or 3 homes before that. So she had a better idea about, the fact that, housing prices, the appreciation of houses. And, when you go through life and you buy a house and then the next house you upgrade, you spend more, and then you spend more, you kind of have an expectation that, hey, look, if I'm moving into something that's, that's better or nicer, that you're probably going to pay for it. But at the same time, that house is probably going to appreciate. And if you stay in it long enough, you're still going to be able to sell the house and make a profit. So I wasn't seeing all of that. So some more time passes, and this house is still on the market at $240,000, and it's not moving. And my wife comes to me again and says, "We need to buy this house. You're gonna regret not buying this house. I'm telling you. We could use the additional room because we can grow into the house. Kids are gonna get bigger and older. I'm telling you, you need to buy this house." And of course, I ignored it because at this point, I'm starting to get a little frustrated and a little mad because I'm like, why you keep nagging me about this damn house when I told you I ain't interested in spending no more money on a house? I like the house payment that we have right now. We get to save money. And even though we could actually afford this house at $240,000 with no issue, for me, I was not comfortable with spending the additional money because my mind just wasn't there. My mind was on paying somewhere around $1,100 to $1,300, and that's all I wanted to spend. So more time goes on, and of course, housing markets recover eventually, and that's exactly what happened. The market recovered, and we're never going to see housing prices like that again. I'm just convinced that that's not going to be something that probably happens again in my lifetime. Sure, there'll be some market downturns, but not like that 2008 through 2010, 12 time frame. So at this time, I'd become a real estate agent. I was also buying rental properties, and I had wholesale some houses, just doing my little thing in real estate. And then one day, my wife brought up this house again, right? And she was like, "We should have bought that house." And I said, "Man, let me go back and look and see, what houses in that area similar to that house were selling for now." And I did the comparative market analysis on that house, and houses in that neighborhood were selling close to $700,000. I could have bought that house for $240,000. And here's the deal: we live about a mile away from that house. Well, not even a mile now; it's less than that. So when we go walking, sometimes we walk through that neighborhood and we go by that house. And every time we pass it, my wife will say, "That should be our house, right? You regret buying that house." And I'm like sick in my stomach. I want to just like roll on the ground and just start kicking because I should have listened, and I should have bought that house at that $240,000. And as of right now, that house, I would probably have about, $400,000 worth of equity, in that house. And it would have been a great investment because, we would have lived in that house and there'd be no reason for us to even move from that house. We'd probably be in it until we were old and ready to downsize. Now you'd think that'd be the end of the story and I would have learned my lesson. No, not me. I didn't learn my lesson. So now some time passes and my wife again comes to me and says, "Hey, kids are getting bigger, older. We could upgrade. We could, use a little bit more room." And at this time, I finally gave in and said, "Yeah, you're probably right. I'm ready to do that." But here's the deal: we couldn't find something right at the moment, but we wanted to be in a position to, be ready to pounce on an opportunity as it popped up. And at this time, I had a rental property that was coming available. And we decided, hey, we will move out of this house, move into the rental, and then when we find the house that we want to buy, then we'll pounce on an opportunity and we can just move out of the rental at any time. But we need to sell your house. So that's what I'm telling my wife. And she's like, "Why do we need to sell it? You buying rental properties, you can keep it and rent it out." And I was like, "Nah." I was like, "I think we should sell it because, I want to have the money to pay for, like moving into the next house." Now, mind you, we both work make good incomes. We could have afforded the new house without selling her house. And she agreed to sell the house, no biggie, but she kept telling me, I think you should keep the property. I think you should keep our house and rent it out. I really do. And of course, me not listening, thinking that I'm the rental property expert here, let me handle this. Now, I ran the numbers and I wasn't thinking for the future, right? I was just thinking for right now. I didn't like the rental numbers because, I was buying, much cheaper houses and rent to value ratios were much, much better. So we ended up selling that house and we sold that house for $190,000 at the time because that's what the market was doing at that time. But fast forward years later, doing this housing boom, that house was selling for $380,000, and the rent had gone up to like $2,800. So if I had have just hung onto the property and rented it out, I would have seen the value go from 190 to around 375, 380, and we were locked into a 30-year fixed rate mortgage at like 4.25. That mortgage was like $1,300. Obviously, the property taxes and the insurance would have gone up a little bit more, but we would have been getting somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,800 for the rent on that property. So we would have been cash flowing, pretty good on that property, as well as the appreciation. So again, I didn't learn from a previous mistake of listening to somebody else. So these two events in my life of not listening to someone, which happens to be my wife, um, cost us about $600,000 in equity, which, I'm a believer that you can use equity because I have used a home equity line of credit to do rehabs on properties, to, down payments for properties. So the fact that people say that, well, you just have that equity, you can't use it until you sell the house. No, that's not true. I would have had a nice, decent chunk of money available on a home equity line of credit if I had bought that house for $240,000 and now that house is worth about $700,000. In addition, we would have been getting that cash flow from that rental property, and I could have used that cash flow from the rental property to invest in my kids' college education fund, or I could have, bought myself something nice with it. We could have took an annual trip with it. So again, I missed out on that money. So I tell you this story in hopes that you will learn from it, and that is, man, don't always discount, what the other person has to say, or the thoughts that the other person might have, because they might have some ideas that you just have not thought about, or maybe they are not afraid of something that you may be afraid of, and if you just talk to them about it, maybe you might, lose some of that fear. So I think I should have just listened a little bit more, and I think would have been better off. Also, in terms of like, keeping her house as a rental property, she probably had more confidence in me as, being a real estate investor than I probably even had in myself at the time, because she was telling me, hey, you're doing good on your other properties. Keep this one and just keep doing what you're doing. But again, didn't listen. So that is all I have for you in this video. I hope you took something of value from it. And if you did, please like, please share with your friends and your family. And in the meantime, take care of yourself and be safe out here in these social media streets.